So if I could start by taking you back to 2009, Ireland was experiencing what the media called a suicide epidemic. And it didn't really feature highly on anyone's list of priorities. And I could never quite understand why you couldn't change the TV channel for seeing a road safety ad. But at the time there were more people dying by suicide than there were on the roads. But you never saw an ad for mental health. It didn't really feature in civil discourse at the time, and it wasn't a conversation that was being had. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, it's not an easy conversation to have. So I shared a house with a pal of mine, JP, who we've known since our late teens. And he came to me one day and said, would you like to help me run a mental health event? And my reaction was, oh, what? And you see, I knew his older brother David had died by suicide when he was 16, but we'd never really spoken about it because it's not an easy conversation to have. But what he didn't know at the time was that I'd been self-harming from the same age, and didn't have to scratch too far under the surface to discover depression, schizophrenia and suicide leafed throughout my family tree. 1 in 4 of us will suffer with a mental health problem at some point in our life. And we carry out annual research around attitudes to mental health in the country, and our research actually indicates that it's actually far worse. 47% of the people we interviewed had openly admitted to having a mental health problem at some point in their life, with 4 in 10 people also admitting to delaying seeking help for fear of stigmatization. So back to, I suppose, my own story again. He didn't know that I was kind of going through this at the time. And again, it was nothing, we didn't talk about any of this stuff in my family. Again, it's not an easy conversation to have at a kitchen table. So when we sat down, the intention was to design a model or a catalyst to start a national mental health conversation. And we had a shared interest in arts and culture. It's my background. JP worked in the mental health services at the time. He's a psychotherapist and a social worker. And our perspective was that culture reflects who we are societally. And artists have always championed issues of great social importance, whether it be hunger, AIDS or equality. And great art can affect great change. So my name is, again, David Keegan. I'm CEO of First Fortnight. First Fortnight, Ireland's national mental health arts festival. And every year we start kitchen table conversations. We challenge stigma and raise awareness through cultural action in the form of a mental health arts festival. At a challenging time of year for a lot of people in January. And in 2013, we became a mental health service provider, delivering free mental health care to vulnerable communities across Dublin, predominantly people in homeless communities or people at risk of experiencing homelessness. And I suppose it's with great pride that this year, particularly this January, we will host Europe's Mental Health Festival in communities across Ireland. And I'd invite you all to join us and end mental health stigma together. So that's me in a nutshell right now. Thanks.
Thanks, David.
Yep.
So I'm gonna kick off a few questions, and then we'll go to audience Q&A. Marina has a microphone ready to hand around to you guys. So thank you for being here, and thank you for...
Turn around and look at you.
Great. And thank you for this amazing festival.
Thanks.
It's really important, and I think it's an amazing thing for a group of people to come together and build up over the past 10 years. So when you and JP discussed this idea maybe 11 years ago, or would it be 12 years ago?
He had his bright idea in 2009. And yeah, that's where the conversation started.
And in 2009, did either of you, even in your wildest dreams, imagine that it would develop into something so important and so successful and so loved?
No, we didn't have any idea whatsoever. We just knew that we had a degree of influence amongst our peers. We had an amount of experience in the relevant areas, and we cared.
Yeah.
And we were directly, we were seeing the effects of stigma all around us. I mean, it's probably not, I would imagine there's probably not many people, or all of us would probably know or be one person removed from someone who has had a mental health difficulty or died by suicide within our kind of peer group. So we were seeing this all around us and had direct personal experience, and change doesn't come from above, it comes from people. So that was literally it. We just kind of combined our powers, and we approached our friends who were in bands or worked in kind of the cultural sector, and we approached other friends who worked in the media, and they played at this one event in a place called Andrews Lane Theatre, which no longer exists.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And we partnered with Mental Health Ireland. Our friends played as part of the event, and the media wrote about it, and we filled that venue. We sold it out, and it exceeded all of our expectations. And we were completely humbled by the outpouring of support we got.
When did you know that it wasn't going to be a once-off? That you guys had to keep doing this?
When we were approached very soon after the first one to see if we were interested to do it again. Yeah, it was directly afterwards. After the first one, we were all we felt we'd hit it was a zeitgeist moment.
Yeah.
That we just felt that there was this, people wanted it, were ready for that conversation. And it was needed. It was needed that public discourse needed to happen. It was a thing that we just weren't talking about. And so that was it. Mental Health Ireland came back to us and said, will you do it again? And that's where it started, really.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And in 10 years from now, where do you think this conversation will be? The conversation either on mental health or on First Fortnight or similar festivals?
The conversation is different year to year. So we try to explore. I mean, we started off with one event, and it was a music event. So I suppose our programming policy is to program high quality art. It's high quality art that has the potential to affect change. And again, it's people will relate to it. And so with that one event, we're constantly looking for how we could have more impacts. That was one genre of potentially what could potentially be a festival, an arts festival. And each genre of art has its own unique medium for communication. So in a lot of ways, the festival itself is just a medium to communicate a positive mental health message or explore mental health themes, and then contextualize everything with conversation and debate. So that was I suppose we tested the model in Andrews Lane. We're a social enterprise. That's kind of how we've always approached it. The festival itself generates an income, and the income is reinvested into the service to manage and maintain its growth, and then also invested into the free services that we provide to homeless communities. So we tested that model in 2010 with our very first event, and then 2011 we needed a bigger venue. Mm-hmm. And we had a new partner in Amnesty International, because they had a campaign around that was their focus was mental health as a human right. And so we kind of developed the program a bit more. We decided to do a mental health talk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the Button Factory. It was a bigger venue with a bigger capacity. It was 750 was the capacity, and we had a mental health talk at 2:30, and then a gig later on that day. So we put out about 150 seats in the Button Factory to have this mental health talk.
Because it's the middle of the day. Yeah.
This is it, and you're kind of like in the situation where it's like you're throwing a party and you're like, who's going to come? Yeah, it's totally that situation. And we only put out 150 seats, and then people started to come in, and they kept coming, and we ended up having to put out another 100 seats. And the venue was packed, and we were like, this is something here, like there's. Like, yeah, and so we were floored, and then we had an event on later that night, and again, we sold it out again. And then that was in partnership, as I said, with Amnesty. And then year 3, so we'd basically done this, just to say, this is purely voluntary. So but both myself and JP had full-time jobs. He worked in HSC at the time. I worked at Pavilion Theatre in Dunleary as a kind of marketing communications manager. So it was completely in our spare time and asking our friends to do bits and pieces to help us out. And so yeah, we did it, and then into year 3, we kind of felt confident enough then. We tested the model 2 years in a row. There was an appetite, there was an audience. People were buying tickets, and we were raising a significant amount of money, and we were basically donating this to our mental health partners. In year 1, it was Mental Health Ireland, we donated to them, and then Amnesty afterwards. But year 3, when we decided, right, we can do a full-blown festival now and try to program a broad amount of kind of different
of styles,
arts genres. We included theatre, film, spoken word poetry, music, but we just made a kind of a mature decision that we needed to kind of register as a company, subsequently register as a charity to reinvest in ourselves, because we were giving the money away. We had no money the following year to reinvest in the festival program. We couldn't book venues. We couldn't, couldn't necessarily program because we didn't know what money we were going to have. But we were very good at finding the money. Well, we were better at like deciding whether or not what we were going to do was going to have an impact. If we agreed it was going to have an impact, then we found the money to do it after the fact, because we weren't paying anybody at the time. It was voluntary, and that's kind of how it started to develop from the first festival.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I missed the first few years of the festival. Unfortunately, I was living abroad. When I came back, one of the first pieces I saw was Half Light.
Oh yeah.
Which is beautiful. So it's a beautiful show. It's from what I remember, it's a little boy's exploration into where his father is, and his father is suffering from depression. So he's trying to find his dad again and reconnect with him. And it's beautiful, but it's so wise and intelligent. I love that piece. It really stuck with me. What have been some of your highlights over the years? Is that an awful question to ask you? Sorry.
What are your favourite
children? Who are your favourite children?
I loved Half Light. I just loved the message in it. It was appropriate for kids and families and adults. And it's like, it is this kid's kind of little fantasy. He builds his own little fantasy land of exactly that, trying to find the dad he's more familiar with than the dad who's suffering with depression, but he doesn't know what it is. It's not named. It's just a thing. It's just not the dad he knows. And so he's on this little journey, and I loved it. But anecdotally after the fact, I'd been told about a person who was involved with the festival, and they had come along with their kids to one of the performances, and he confided in me that they'd brought it along, and he'd actually suffered at one stage with depression, but they'd never really talked about it as a family. And so essentially, well, this is well, not actually, because he was in a better place at the time when the kids came along and they went as a family. And after the fact, he got in touch to say, actually, we came out of the show, and one of the kids actually turned around and said, "Dad, is that what you were going through?" or kind of a thing. And then it opened up the opportunity for him to have that conversation with his kid, and then kind of gain a level of understanding about what had happened.
What an insightful little child.
Absolutely, yeah. And so we're very familiar that what we do does have an impact, because there's lots of research around creativity and mental health, and it having a good positive social impact.
So here are no favourites, David.
So yeah, I loved that. What else? I had there's been so many pieces that have come through. What have been my favourites? I should have really thought about this before I kind of sat down with you.
Well, that's okay. We can come back to that later on. We've probably had a few people in the audience who've been to a few and might be able to share some of theirs.
Some of our we one of the things that we do is we partnered with the Fringe Festival, Dublin Fringe Festival, and every year they have the Fringe Festival Awards, like the Spirit of the Fringe or Best Production. We partnered with them because we wanted to award a piece of theatre that speaks to the mission of First Fortnight, challenging mental health stigmas or exploring mental health themes. And the very first year we offered that award, there were, I think, 4 pieces shortlisted for consideration for our award, and a piece won. It was called Dolls, and the point of the Dolls was it was like it bombarded all of your senses, and it was kind of like movement and a dance piece, but essentially it was kind of mixed multimedia. And it was like really bright lights and really kind of really loud piece with movement, and it was repetitive, and then it showed very kind of graphic images, but there are graphic images that we see on a daily basis, but ultimately the point of the piece was to present what women have to go through in and what they have to kind of experience in the media, what they're told, the messaging that's consistently is on rotation basically, and the impact that it has to women and their mental health, and then we kind of would have contextualized the whole thing with post-show debate about like new ways or challenging media and stuff like that. So the ones that have kind of come through, that was when we offered that award. As I said, there were 4 pieces shortlisted. So we did that award this year, and I think there's 24 pieces shortlisted by the Fringe Festival, with another 6. So our intention by offering that award was that we only have so much time to see art to programme. And so through the Fringe Festival, we get to see now all of their work, but not only just see the work and then award it, it's actually encourage more work, inspire more work to be made in this vein, and challenge kind of societal norms that really should be challenged at this stage.
And can you tell us yet who you've chosen for next year from the
Fringe Festival? Yeah. It's called Infinity.
Who's presenting that? Off the top of your head, sorry to put you on the spot.
God, someone look up on the programme there and they'll be able to tell me. But it's a beautiful piece of theatre around, I suppose, again, the bombardment on our senses and the the digital kind of impact of communication nowadays, and I suppose the anxiety around just how bombarded we are by the
constant flashing or the light on your phone. And
exactly. And it's kind of the message is that it's kind of okay to not be okay. But yeah, it was a fantastic piece and an easy one for us to judge on this year.
Brilliant. Over the years, have you noticed in what way, or if at all, the conversations during the festival have changed? Like maybe the Q&A afterwards, have they changed at all? How is the conversation developing?
I think best example I can give you is we worked with a band when we were kind of starting off. I think it was into our first 4 years, and we worked with a band, and they were quite a high-profile band at the time, and so we had kind of extended an invitation to participate. We always provide the opportunity for artists who want to speak on the subject of or the themes raised in the festival program, the themes that we want to discuss by programming the festival the way we do. It's not like you don't have to have had a mental health problem. This festival is for everybody. It's actually just exploring mental health themes. There's a lot in there for everyone to kind of get their head around. But essentially, after the festival had happened, after this particular event had happened, it was a music event. One of the members of that band kind of approached myself, my co-founder, and was really apologetic and very, very emotional because they didn't necessarily know what they were participating in. It was more an opportunity to play this big gig that was happening, and they had. But actually, it was over the course of their involvement in the festival that they'd apparently gone to their record company because they'd recently had a diagnosis of manic depression, and they approached their publisher to find out whether or not they could share that story through the media because they were doing an article for a national broadsheet, and the advice was given that they shouldn't. So then they performed the event and realized retrospectively, the impact that we were trying to have and the reasons that we were programming these types of events and the festival itself. And it was hugely emotional, massively apologetic.
Of course, they're emotional, that's tough.
For not having shared a story, because that was kind of the point. But look, the other side of it is that he may not have been ready to share that story. because we bring a lot of attention to the program itself, and it's a very personal kind of journey someone has to take to be comfortable enough to share that story and shine a light on it, because the stigma is still so prevalent in today's society, which is.
And how is the Q&A, the after show conversations, have they changed? Are people asking new questions, or are more people asking questions?
Sorry, I kind of ducked that question a little bit by giving an anecdote. Sorry, how is the question? How is the conversation? I'll tell you, the conversations have changed. I think people are a lot more open to talking about mental health. In my experience, it tends to be one person removed from the person you're talking about. Now, I've been in a very privileged position in that I've been doing this a long time, and my friends feel very comfortable to talk to me about what they might be going through, or a family situation or whatever. But if it's someone that I tend not to know, it tends to be one person removed from the person, someone else's problem. And there's also. There still seems to be a distance, and there's you'll all know that you can go on any social media channel and you'll generally see something every day about mental health in the feed. But again, social media now has just become, you're numb to it. You see it in a feed, but how much do you see the headline, but do you actually read the story, or how much of an impact does it actually have? So, it's a lot more prevalent, but stigma and culture takes a long time to change. And it presents another problem, not really a problem, but I think the conversation is so prevalent, and it's again, I'd like to think we're part of that cultural shift. But now people are happy to talk about mental health more openly, or even address issues before they become serious problems. But if you rely on public services, the help really isn't there. You're going on a waiting list for 6 to 9 months, and if you're in a state of emergency, that's where you're going. You're going to the emergency room, and you'll be given a priority, and that's something that really needs to change. So in terms of the dialogue as well, 2 years ago we started a campaign in collaboration with one of our mental health partners, Mental Health Reform, and it was around 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service provision, emergency service provision. The following year, Minister Jim Daly announced that it would be happening. But it would be set 24-hour care 5 days a week. So you can see it shifting. Now, it's slow to shift, but they're all positive changes. It's certainly going in the right direction. But it's then answering questions around. I did a talk for, not sure if you're familiar with the Federation of Music Collectives, or Hardworking Class Heroes. It's a music festival that goes on in the city. So I was asked to participate in a post-show or a debate about, or just to talk about music and mental health. And one of the questions I was asked about was about the pressures on musicians to nearly create a mental illness in order to bring focus onto your music, or the pressures they feel to open up about things that they wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with, to bring attention or promote the music that they're trying to.
As it's their social responsibility? Was that what the
No, not even.
saying?
Almost like saying that there's it's disingenuous.
If they don't?
Yeah, that it's not necessarily a problem, that it wasn't necessarily depression, but they're calling it depression in order to bring attention to their music. And I don't know whether or not I buy into that. But it seemed to be, I saw a lot of nods when the questions were asked in the room, so it seemed to be a shared opinion. So it's that's quite toxic, and I don't know really where that comes from. I wonder, is a part of that we're just numb to how prevalent we see it in social media feeds, but how many meaningful conversations do you realistically have about mental health?
Do you think, is it another way of promoting the stigma, or protecting yourself from being involved in the stigma, having that attitude, do you think?
Having the attitude as to be...
That those artists are, she's not really depressed, he's not really depressed, they're doing it because it helps sell, they're saying this because it helps sell their album. Is it another way of just ignoring the problem, or is it fear?
I think it comes back to this idea of presenting your best self on social media, that people then there's an Irish even though we're in Google and it's multicultural, but there's I don't know if you've ever heard of Irish begrudgery.
So you should explain Irish begrudgery. I'm not sure if we might be the only two Irish people. Oh, well, There's maybe 4 of us.
Okay. Irish begrudgery is we're happy for you to do okay, but if you do better than okay, we're yeah. You need to find your place, and you need to be on a level with everybody else. No one wants to see someone else be successful. That tends to be
we're very nice at it.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if it's around, and I have had conversations with friends who are artists, and they would be on social media, and they'd be looking at other artists on social media, and seeing that they've had this success and blah blah blah, and then they go, oh, I'm better than him. I don't understand why he's getting that gig, and they've taken themselves off social media because, and not to say that social media is a terrible thing, but just to say that there are impacts with all of this sharing, and I suppose what it comes down to is like meaningful conversation, like having a meaningful sharing with somebody, and that's again the purpose of the festival. It's actually bringing people out to be at an event and actually experience it. Because me talking about a mental health arts and culture festival, I'm sure some of you are sitting in the room who haven't been to it or been to anything similar to it will be like, how does that even work? And we were like that for a few years, and we were doing it for a few years, and coming to terms with what the model is and what our approach is, and how we affect change, meaningful change. And it's all of those things. And I mean, the festival is like it's a selection box for mental health discussions. So a lot of people don't know the ways that you can manage your mental health and like to a balanced lifestyle. And like obviously medication is one approach, but then your diet has a big impact on your mental health. Your stress levels, how social you are, whether you're getting enough exercise, those bits and pieces.
Time in nature.
Yeah, and exactly, absolutely. Like we've a massive disconnect now in society from nature, and most, like when you think about it, everything's man-made around us. We weren't born, we're mammals. Like we've just lost that connection to nature, and like it's just a walk and or like a bit of exercise, or like addressing some dietary, your diet can have a massive impact on your mood, and people don't know it. Like it's I know it's anecdotal to say, oh well, of course that's common sense, but it's one thing saying common sense, and another thing saying, well, these are the things you should look at to address your diet, because well, what are you eating? And like again, some of the things that would happen, say in a play, where we would advertise to the general public. It's not direct or target marketed to people who are interested in theatre. It's actually just, there could be like a big name who's in a theatre production, and you might just pop along to it because a friend brought you. It's important for us to contextualise it for someone where the message isn't necessarily clear, or just to provide an opportunity for questions, which you're more than welcome to ask over the course of this conversation. But that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question. The conversation is really, what's interesting actually is how the priorities change for us year to year.
Okay.
Like, well, just to give another example, one of our Fringe Festival Award winners was an amazing company called Sunday's Child, and they did a piece called My Name is Saoirse, and it was around the time of the abortion referendum. And her whole piece was just about the impact on, so she wrote a piece about a young girl whose mother passed away when she was young, and she had she had 2 brothers and her father. She was being raised by her father and stuff, and she'd gotten pregnant unexpectedly when she was a teenager, and but then lived in a rural town, and then couldn't tell anybody, and couldn't tell her father, and had to deal with her on her own. And not only did she have to deal with her on her own, she wasn't ready to have a child, so wanted to travel away to have a termination. And so it was about this experience and the trauma that she had to go through, kind of just accepting that she was in the situation, having no one to talk to for fear of it going through this rural community, and having to deal with not only the stigma of getting pregnant in the first place, but then the stigma of having a termination, and
all on her own.
And all on her own, with no access to supports, and like just subtle things like having to get, say, a boat as opposed to a plane for fear of being seen at an airport by somebody else. So it made more sense. So again, that became like a theme, and we aren't so arrogant to just program a festival without actually asking our audience what it is they want to see in the next festival program. So we had never programmed child and family events. We were kind of in a particular we're kind of broad program for like a broad demographic, but never specifically child and family friendly events. And then we started to get this feedback to do more of, to start doing them. And that program's just blown up. And like we usually, so just to say as well, we're called First Fortnight because we start at the beginning of the new year. So there's Green Ribbon campaign run by one of our mental health partners, Sea Change. That happens in May. And then there's Mental Health Week, which is in October. World Mental Health Day is in 10th of October. But I suppose our model is based on my co-founder, JP, as a psychotherapist and a social worker. He would just know from the beginning of the new year, or that first quarter, his caseload would shoot up. And Christmas is challenging for a lot of people. I'm not massively into Christmas, and I never have been. I've never been one for New Year's either. But if you've had a particularly challenging year and you're facing into a brand new one, and you haven't had a particularly good Christmas or New Year's, or you've found it quite stressful, that first quarter, that first month can be quite challenging. Yeah. So that's why we kind of do it when we do it. It's to start people off on a positive mental health note, explore some of these themes in the hope that someone will come along or someone will read about of us in an associated article and address an issue before it becomes a serious problem.
Great. Have we got any questions from the audience? I've lots more to go, but I just want to see. Great. You can fire away.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I'm just curious, how do you pick the pieces that go into the festival? Are people coming to you, or are you going to them, and how has that changed over the years?
Good question. Yeah, in the beginning so I should also say that what we do is only possible because of the voluntary support we get. When we started off, again, we had full-time jobs that paid our rent or our mortgages, so we did this in our spare time. We've kind of maintained that model. We're very grassroots, and we've kind of grown to an organisation that, at this stage, we're five employees. And then we've contract employees or contract staff who come in and deliver the festival programme in tech and, say, communications, or volunteer coordinator. But we'd have 150 people who will voluntarily sign up to deliver the festival programme. Our board is voluntary, and they're 12 people, and we've another resource team of about 7 who fundraise on our behalf, again voluntary, and a communications team of about 5, again voluntary. That's the only thing that makes us possible. But ultimately, all of those people, they are the change makers. And it's those guys that help us to programme. In the background, as I said, we're 5 staff, but I mentioned we run a centre for creative therapies, so we employ 2 art therapists to work with our clients, and then we've got 2 full-time staff, and then 2 other kind of part-time staff. So some years we do a call out for work, and we'll just, through our partners, we'll just look for people to make submissions to us, and then we'd have a panel of experts who will basically judge the work based on our priorities, and then we'll decide on the programme. And it comes down to funding as well, what funding is available for the festival programme. And year on year, the festival just keeps getting bigger, in and around 20% between what it costs in terms of resources, but in terms of the actual programme itself. So the ambition was always that we would produce a national mental health festival, but it's just been very organic in its development. Started in Dublin, and then we kind of went to the satellite counties, and then we kind of identified Cork as a new hub, and that festival programme has expanded from 1 event into 8. We're in 24 counties this year with about 184 events. But this edition of the festival is actually Europe's mental health festival that we're presenting, and with participation from 12 countries with 2 European networks. So it's kind of a combination. It's work that we may have started to develop over a period of time. And it's the staple things that we do, like the staples being like we have a flagship music event at the end of the programme. We do obviously our Fringe Festival award winner, that goes to whatever production work wins. And we've got the therapy sessions that happen in the Workman's every year. But then the selection process through the call out. So it's kind of a combination of that. And then we'll have board members who are interested or experts in particular areas like film or theatre who will kind of make recommendations to the board. So it's kind of a combination of all those things. But we're constantly looking for new work.
Good question. Do you have something you want to submit?
Maybe one day.
Maybe. Excellent. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, one at the back of the room.
So you started the conversation off talking about stigma of mental health, and someone who has, as someone who has had mental health issues and problems in the last few years, I've got a lot of support from the company that I've worked for prior to Google, and since starting Google, I've seen all of the EAP, all of the mental health stuff. But from a corporate level, what do you think a company can do to help the stigma, particularly around mental health?
Things like this. I think things like this, it's a very mature approach to addressing and actually kind of recognising the impact of the positive mental health and well-being of staff on an organisation. And I think the tech companies in particular have been like leading the leaders in this approach, in my experience, because I've done a couple of these with a couple of tech companies, and I've been really impressed with the investment in the staff, and the recognition of the importance of mental health and well-being. I think a lot of other organisations could take note and apply some of the same. Like actually, there's a mental health week is a good idea in kind of any company, or just check-ins with staff. I mean, I know I don't know if it's with some tech companies provide access to free mental health care or access to therapists or like even massages and stuff like that. I mean, I never got that in my profession. I don't know, did you when you were practicing artist?
When I was when I was a practicing artist, there was certainly none of that kind of support. But I had a lot of free time, for walks on the beach or things like that. So I guess I just had to look after my own mental health from my own point of view. But we are lucky. We do have quite a significant amount of support, and it is lovely to have this talk. And originally, when I was saying at the beginning, I wanted David to come in, I think back in February, but I was conscious that he had just finished the festival, and then between a few different things, I had to change the date a few times. But I think it turned out to be a lovely timing for the talk, really.
Kind of great,
Not only for the festival, that's great to support that, but also because of everything you've been saying about the time of year, the limited sunlight that we have this time of year, and just all the effects that can have. So it is great to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Another one at the front of the room. Thanks, Marina.
So I really liked what you were talking about, the events that involve families, so parents and children. Do you think there's any gap in terms of teenagers? I know that my sister's 16, and I try and be as open as possible with her so that she talks about it with her friends. Mm-hmm. And she said that they had someone in talking to them about mental health, which is something that I never got in school. But do you see teenagers coming to your events, that kind of age group?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've started to program specifically for that demographic, who are massively at risk, and we're seeing unbelievable record numbers of anxiety, and particularly amongst teenagers and younger. We've partnered actually with Spun Out this year to engage with their kind of their audiences on what our messaging is, but also that involving their kind of their audience in the work that we're kind of doing. There's a massive duty of care though as well at the same time, because the festival it's every kind of winter. We've tried to launch a project where we would work directly in schools to bring these conversations to schools and actually provide an opportunity for the youth to engage with mental health service providers. So, and for kids in schools, it can be a very toxic place. So it's work that we would like to do more of, but we're very conscious in terms of our duty of care that we don't want to just parachute into a school and then disappear. And then you've got a lot of at-risk kids who've been, encouraged to speak openly, and then there be no support for them. In a lot of cases, you've got teachers who are inundated, under-resourced, having to be that frontline member or that frontline essentially therapist, or person for that kid to talk to. And they're not equipped, and they shouldn't be in that position. And then you've got other schools that would have guidance counsellors who are there really to provide professional guidance counselling, and not there from a mental health and wellbeing perspective. But Jigsaw are doing a lot of work with schools and stuff like that, and spun out. So we're kind of partnering with them on individual projects. And as I said, like we built our organisation up voluntarily because we invest heavily in kind of marketing and PR and communications, because, as I said, the festival is a medium to have these conversations. So we have to, like, it's important for us to communicate what's happening with the festival because we're limited by capacity. I said we had 184 events in this festival program. We're generally up to 80% occupancy because we invest so heavily in the marketing and communications of the message, but our reach is far greater than the festival program itself. So I suppose our approach is that people have the opportunity to read about what we're doing and start those kitchen table conversations, so that it's far more prevalent, provide the opportunity. And the festival, again, it provides a kind of a safe space where that conversation is possible because someone's talking about it on stage, and it's like, Jesus, actually.
Maybe it's okay to start the conversation.
And again, and another example of that is we carry out attitudinal research every year, and our audience is 70% women, and we knew that, like, just from, again, are you male or female? It's completely anonymous, but that would hold true with cultural festivals or the arts generally. There's generally 70% women, 30% men, male audiences. So, but again, we're about impact, and so we needed to diversify and engage with a male kind of demographic. I know yours is specific to kind of younger adults, but just to give you an example, I suppose we diversified it into sport, I suppose, to engage with kind of men, younger men as well. We designed an event called Corinthian, and have had people like, for instance, Brezzy or
There's a GAA player, isn't there? There's a GAA
Donald
star?
Oak,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's working with you as well.
And so, we kind of tried to, and it's each year we kind of, again, we're just responding to what people want to see, and then try to match the ambitions of the festival with resources in order to do what we do. There's also, I should say about our model, what we do is only possible through creative collaboration and partnerships. There's a lot of logos on the inside sleeve of that program, from a funding perspective, but also from a reach perspective. We have 4 mental health partners there, and without their support and their help and their advice year on year, what we do wouldn't be possible. We wouldn't be able to get into 24 counties and have the impact that we have. So Jigsaw, for instance, and Spun Out do great work, and we want to do more work with them in the future to program and cater for those audiences, because again, there's record numbers in depression and anxiety in younger people. And
so Jigsaw and Spun Out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's such an amazing medium to get the conversation going on it.
Thanks.
Everything you do. Thank you so much.
Another quick question. We might get a time check. Somebody, are we okay on time? Before we go to another audience question, kind of a bit of a segue then into the service provision that you're moving into and the advocacy, and what does that change mean for the festival? What does it mean for you and your workload, and what should we expect from you guys next?
Okay, so, that's a big question.
A lot of questions.
So our advocacy work has been through the festival and growing the festival. So the presentation of this European edition of our festival, that's started in 2015, believe it or not, when Dublin were part of the Dublin 2020 bid, when we were invited to be part of the Dublin 2020 bid, and we were listening to all of the great benefits a city gains from winning the award of city capital city of culture, European City of Culture, and we kind of had this collective thought where we were like, well, why couldn't there be a European mental health festival that would bring not only the benefits for that we were hearing, but also the social benefits that I suppose our festival would bring to mental health and well-being of the respective city that it would visit. And that's how that started. And then in 2016, we were part of a partnership that produced Europe's first mental health festival in Athens in October 2016. An outcome of that was the establishment of a network for mental health festivals, a European network for mental health festivals. And we made a bid to that network to host Europe's second mental health festival in Ireland. And it was successful, and that's how we are where we are today.
That's January.
That's this January, that's what you'll see this year. So we're exploring, so we're such an international little island now at this stage. And now more than ever, with like kind of alt-right movements gathering momentum across countries like, it's most of Europe actually, well, a lot of Europe, but in particular now probably Italy and Hungary, with, can I use the word? Brexit in this.
We talked about not using it.
I know, yeah, I know. Like I didn't know a way around saying it without saying it. Happening in March. This is an opportunity in January, with that looming in March, to celebrate two things that connect us despite everything else, and that's our culture and our mental health and well-being. So just to come back then, our service provision, our intention is to actually roll out free mental health care for artists and artistic communities across the country by Q3 of next year. So that's
amazing.
That's been a massive, so we would identify them as, I mean, they're core to everything that we do, and I personally am in awe of artists, because, you know, they've a lot of strength and the courage to get up on stage in the first place, but also to open their heart to subject matter that is really challenging, and share it with us in the hope that it has impact with audiences. So we, in collaboration with several partners, we kind of talked about this idea of free mental health care for that particular community, and that's something that will roll out by September next year.
Wow, that'd be an amazing achievement. Can you tell us how can our audience or any of their friends and their family get involved? Either next year or the following year at this stage, maybe?
Yeah, you can find everything else about the festival on our website, which is fortnight.ie. So, I mean, you all have there's a festival program there. It's all the details are on our festival. As I said, it's across the country. So, hopefully, there's something there for everyone.
What date does the festival start?
January 1st.
Oh, January 1st.
Yeah, and it ends. It's a whole month now. So it's actually the first event's on the 1st and the last event's on the 30th.
Going to change your name?
Well, it always starts in the first 2 weeks of the year,
Yeah.
but we've actually, even though we've never actually been a 14-day
It'll eventually be the first quarter.
First quarter, I don't know, for my own sanity and mental health, I think 1 month is probably
Is
enough.
for you.
Yeah.
Any final questions from the audience? I'm a bit conscious of time. We're all good? Oh, just one at the front of the room. Just one more.
Yeah. Kind of hit the nail on the head when you said, like, you know, Christmas can be pretty shit for people. Do you have any kind of tips or advice on like how we can kind of look out for friends and family over Christmas who might be going through?
Great closing question. Thank you.
It's check-ins. It's making the time. You know, it's. I mean, you know, a lot of people know when your friends aren't right or your family aren't right, and it is just. It's having a cup of tea, it's making the time, and it can be quite challenging because we're running around buying Christmas presents like lunatics and closing off, trying to finish off, you know, your loose ends so you can walk away without, you know, worrying about that email that I didn't send. So it's actually, and it's again, stress upon stress upon stress, but it's difficult to try and make that time, but it is really important. And again, I'll give you another example. We diversified into sport. We applied for an award that we subsequently didn't get. We got shortlisted for it, but we didn't actually get the award. But a person who was involved with that award scheme was part of a big multinational. And he told me about a story that he'd brought friends to come to our festival. And the reason he brought his friend was going through a tough time. And he knew something was wrong, but he didn't know how to bring it up. So he thought, I'll bring him along to Corinthian and see if, see if it jars something with him. Brought him along to Corinthian, and on the way home, they were walking home, and his friend actually said, "You know what? I'm actually not in a good place at the moment." They went for something to eat and had a coffee and talked it through, and he decided that he was actually going to book himself in for some therapy, basically. So that's one way, but it's kind of checking in with people, really.
So be brave and check in. Yeah, it's tough. Right, thank you, David. It's been a pleasure having you today, and I'm sorry it took me so long to get you in, and best of luck in January.
Thank you.
Thanks.